your deepest desires, your mission, and your purpose in life. And the part of the iceberg above the surface of the water represents what's on the outside, your sales position, your earnings, your accolades, and your possessions. Now, if you've ever read anything about icebergs, you know that very little of the mass of an iceberg shows above the surface. In fact, experts estimate that on average only 10% of the entire mass of an iceberg appears above the surface. What that means is that 90% of the mass is beneath the surface, invisible to those above the water. In other words, what you see above the surface is not an accurate representation of an iceberg at all. It's just the tip. And the same is true of sales success. What appears on the outside of your sales career doesn't accurately represent how successful you are. Now imagine what would happen if we could saw off the entire foundation of an iceberg beneath the surface. Without its foundation below the water, what would happen to the iceberg? A dense, substantial iceberg would begin to sink until there was enough of it submerged to regain its balance. It would probably remain standing, but the proverbial tip of the iceberg would be much smaller than it once was. And the iceberg would certainly become much less stable and much easier for the changing tide to displace. If a thin, fragile iceberg had its base removed, the tip above the surface would probably fall over. And without a solid foundation, the iceberg would become a slave to the ever-changing ebb and flow of the tide. In fact, without a foundation, the small iceberg may cease to be an iceberg altogether. In similar fashion, without a solid foundation beneath the surface of your career, your outward success as a sales professional will never be stable or consistent, even if you've been in the industry for some time. Furthermore, you will always have difficulty establishing trust with your clients because you're not trustworthy. Your motives are not right or pure. And most people can discern the difference between a salesperson who's out to make a dollar and one who's out to make a difference. And the longer you try to build your sales career without a proper foundation, the greater the likelihood that your career will come toppling down. You see, true success doesn't begin with the stuff on the outside. Whom you persuaded last week, how much you sold last month, what you earned last year, or how much you can afford to buy this year. Like an iceberg, what's above the surface is not reliable. Lasting success is built with the stuff on the inside, who you are and who you want to become, why you sell, and what legacy you intend to leave. The greatest inhibitor of sales success. For over 20 years, I've been interviewing, training, and coaching sales professionals. And the one factor I have found that prohibits salespeople from succeeding more than any other single factor is lack of purpose. Most haven't answered the why question for their careers. In other words, the majority of unsatisfied salespeople become that way because their jobs aren't aligned with a greater sense of purpose. And it shows in their methods of doing business, in their relationship with clients, and on their faces. The problem is that they're trying to build their careers from the outside in. They're looking for inner satisfaction from outward things, but that's backward. And while the desire for money and material things or anything else inferior to purpose can keep anyone motivated early on, when the time between sales starts to grow, it's rarely enough to keep one afloat. The power to pull you through. If you've never taken time to determine the deeper purpose beneath your sales profession, then your road to high-trust selling must start there, beneath the surface, on the inside, before you will ever truly be satisfied and successful on the outside. But once you identify your purpose with regard to success in your sales career and begin to align that purpose with your activities and your goals, you create what's called pull power, which is the greatest motivating force for the work you perform. Pull power is the antithesis of willpower, which is merely self-generated energy that produces short-term accomplishment but rarely sustains long-term achievement. To exploit pull power in your career, you must know why you do what you do. Let me say that again. You must know why you do what you do. Once established, your answer then becomes the force that literally motivates or pulls you along, in good times and bad, when sales are red hot and when they're ice cold. Pull power is your inner accountability, your constant reminder from the heart of the deeper reason you are selling. The problem is that most sales professionals get ahead of themselves. Most spend the better part of their early days trying to figure out the hows of their jobs. How can I make more sales? How can I make more money? How will I meet my quota? How can I motivate my sales team to produce more? They're all questions that have their place, but answering them is not where a successful sales career begins. It's not enough to know how to be a good sales professional. To become a successful, trustworthy salesperson, you must first know why you want to be one. I have been the frustrated salesperson. I have lost big accounts or failed to nail them down. I've gone too long between sales. And I've been Joe's salesperson. In fact, it was at that point in my career, when I had the big fat bank account, the fast car, the nice house, that I finally opened my eyes to the damage I was doing by selling solely to attain outward success. Those of you who perhaps have heard me speak may know that I was a cocaine addict for over 2 years. And over that period of time, I spent nearly $80,000 on the drug du jour. On the outside, I appeared to be very successful, and for that matter, most people probably thought I was satisfied as well. Remember, I was Joe's salesperson. I had the fat bank account. I had the Porsche Carrera Cabriolet. I had the nice place at the beach. I had the custom-made suits and the expensive toys. You name it, I had it. But the truth is that on the inside, I was running on empty, and my destruction was imminent. Fortunately, I pulled myself out of that pit before it was too late. Or to be more precise, my purpose pulled me out of that pit. It began while sitting on my couch after a midnight jog. With the cocaine still racing through my veins, my heart refused to slow down. Flipping on the television to try and relax, I watched in discomfort as a television sports anchor announced the sudden death, the cocaine overdose, of a young basketball star named Len Bias. Maybe you remember the terrible tragedy. Here was a young kid just out of college who had become the first pick in the NBA draft the day before. He was destined for stardom, but his lifestyle caught up with him. The news hit me hard. That night I finally came to terms with my short-sightedness and immediately went back to the beginning, to the whys of my career, to my higher purpose for becoming a sales professional. And it was there I found real power to take my career to new heights. Laying your foundation for selling success. It's pretty straightforward. To follow the law of the iceberg, you must be solid on the inside first. You must solidify your higher purpose in your sales career so that you are strong enough to weather the rough tides of the sales profession, focused enough to leverage the best opportunities, and steadfast enough to secure the trust of your clients. With a sound purpose, you establish a firm and powerful foundation for achieving the highest and truest measure of success. Consider the success of pharmaceutical giant Merck & Company, Inc. In their book, Lessons from the Top, authors Thomas Neff and James Citron report their findings after discussing Merck's last decade of success with the company's president and CEO, Ray Gilmartin. Said Gilmartin, "One of the things that George W. Merck said was that, quote, medicine is for people and not for profits. If you remember that, profits will follow," end quote. And that's true of my own personal philosophy as well. And the more we have remembered that we are producing medicines to improve people's lives, the more profits we have made. Our share price is a reward for doing that well. Fortune magazine recently ranked Merck as one of the top 10 best companies to work for, and in their summary they said that employees like the fact that they are working toward a higher purpose. They spoke to the reporter about our low-cost AIDS drug, which was consciously priced lower than the other protease inhibitors on the market. We could have gotten more money for it because of the characteristics of the drug. It's something we discussed, but we talked about the George W. Merck philosophy and considered the need of getting the drug to the people who needed it. And we came down on the side of the lower price. And I think that not only had a positive impact outside the company, but inside as well. This is a very reinforcing concept. So not only do we talk about this stuff about having a higher purpose, but we base our actions on it. We're not going to consume our talent or people in the sole pursuit of achieving financial results. We have a higher purpose that we're committed to. A deeper purpose was, is, and will continue to be the thrust of Merck's success. Living the law of the iceberg. There are many ways to determine your purpose at work, but in my experience, the most effective way is to answer one question. What's important to me about being successful? Determining your higher purpose starts with defining the word success, because that is the paradigm with which most people identify. But success has